Welcome back to The Quest for the Cures Continues, folks. I'm so glad that you joined us tonight. I hope that in last night's episode, Nature's Pharmacy, you learned a lot about herbs and vitamins and foods that can give you health. We're going to learn more about that tonight. The importance of nutrition just can't be stressed enough, in light of the fact that even many medical doctors don't understand. Case in point, a good friend of mine who's in The Quest for the Cures Continues, Dr. Irvin Sawney. I actually went to college with Dr. Sawney. He has texted me pictures over the last couple of years of the doctor's lounge at the hospital where he works. And in the doctor's lounge, the foods that are available for these doctors who are supposed to be helping us to get healthy, the foods that are available are Cheetos, chips, candies, and they've even got a whole refrigerator full of sodas, diet sodas, that are full of aspartame. The chips are full of genetically modified foods, which we've already learned about cause cancer. So these are the health professionals that are supposed to be teaching us. There is a disconnect. I was able to travel to Austin, Texas and hook up with Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, the founder of naturalnews.com, which is the second most visited natural health website in the entire world. And Mike shared with us some amazing information about this disconnect. He elaborated further about how it is that these medical professionals that are supposed to be keeping us healthy really don't understand the importance of good nutrition on our health. I know you're going to learn a lot from tonight's show, so pull up a chair, grab a pen and paper, and take some notes. Hope you enjoy the show.
Well, and it's also a great example of the astonishing disconnect that exists in the mainstream medical system.
Right.
They think that your body is somehow disconnected from what you feed your body.
Yeah.
Which is astonishing.
Isn't that bizarre?
Completely irrational,
yeah,
illogical, unscientific, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the good news is that it becomes very easy to start waking people up and start educating people
Mm-hmm.
about what's real in terms of nutrition and health, because it's people can understand this. We live in a materialistic type of society.
Yeah.
So if you start with a material metaphor or a material explanation, you can make good progress in this. You can say, well, look, what you eat and drink is digested, right? And it becomes your blood composition.
Yeah.
Your blood is made of what you eat and drink. And people say, yeah, I get that. Okay, great. Unless you think your blood is made magically, which it doesn't happen.
Right.
So then your blood circulates throughout your body. Your blood brings the materials that then become your organs, that fuel your brain, your cognitive function, that fuel the function of all your organs,
Mm-hmm.
and that replenish and rebuild all the cells of your
Yeah.
body. As you lose cells, you build new cells, you replace cells. So clearly what's in your blood becomes your physical body, right? And they say, yeah, right, I get that. So then, you literally are what you eat physically. It's an inescapable conclusion. So if you're eating junk, if you're eating toxins, if you're eating heavy metals, your body, your brain, your organs, your skin, everything that's in your physical body becomes junk, becomes toxic,
Wow.
becomes processed,
Mm-hmm.
not natural. That idea is not yet recognized by the entire system of modern medicine, with all its claimed advances, with all the billions of dollars that have gone into the cancer research industry.
Yeah.
They still cannot yet grasp a simple concept that a 5-year-old understands almost automatically. You are what you eat.
So if we want to be healthy, we need to eat healthy foods. I've heard it said that cancer is a disease of malnutrition. So let's see what Dr. Patrick Quillen, who wrote the best-selling definitive book on cancer nutrition, has to say about this ever so important issue. Beautiful fruit trees. You've already given me a small tour. We're going to take another one later around your yard. At least a couple dozen different types of fruits. So I can see from this, the place that you live, that you understand the impact of nutrition. And so talk about the impact of nutrition specifically on cancer. What is cancer and what does nutrition have to do with cancer?
A broad, expansive, sort of global question here, Ty. So forgive me if we take a couple of side spurs. My book, Beating Cancer with Nutrition, which has sold 500,000 copies and is considered the definitive work in that area. It's been translated into 5 languages. I organized 3 international symposia on the subject of adjuvant or helpful nutrition in cancer treatment. And then a textbook came out of that, Adjuvant Nutrition in Cancer Treatment. So all of this is not just hearsay and innuendo, but essentially there's 5 main reasons why all cancer patients need to use nutrition as part of their comprehensive cancer treatment. And a forewarning, I would not use nutrition as sole therapy against cancer. It's insufficient, but it is irreplaceable. And so given that, let's just think of the 5 main reasons why every cancer patient needs to include nutrition as part of their comprehensive therapy. Number 1, nutrition actually is a big part of the malnutrition. 40% of cancer patients die of malnutrition, not of the cancer. Cancer is a wasting disease. Appetite is affected. You end up in the hospital with food that you're unfamiliar with. Chemo and radiation can induce cachexia or lean tissue loss. So malnutrition kills 40% of cancer patients. The only therapy for that is proper nutrition. It sometimes needs to be aggressive with a metabolic support team, such as total parenteral nutrition and other things. Number 2 is that nutrition can help to make chemo, radiation, and surgery more of a selective therapy. In other words, chemo and radiation are non-selective toxins. They're cytotoxic poisons. They kill everything in their pathway. And there is what they call collateral damage. So a patient who is receiving chemo is going to have a certain amount of hair loss, nausea, vomiting, weight loss, all as part of the chemo, but nutrition can make chemo, radiation, and surgery more selectively toxic to the tumor and less toxic to the patient. And this is where a very important part of my message is to get the oncologist and the nutritionist and the cancer patient in the same room together, and they all have the goal of beating this cancer. And the fact is, a well-nourished cancer patient can better manage the disease and the therapies that are used for it. So number 2 is nutrition makes chemo more of a rifle rather than a hand grenade. Number 3, we find that cancer is a sugar feeder. Cancer is what's called an obligate glucose metabolizer, meaning that there is a dramatic uptake of glucose in the cells of tumor cells. If you can lower gut and blood glucose, you can help to slow down cancer. And there's a number of therapies now that target this whole unique Achilles heel of the cancer cells. Number 4, we find that your immune system is supposed to recognize and destroy cancer cells. In a cancer patient, the immune system has failed its duties. There has to be some ways of upregulating the immune system. So that's a whole study in itself. And number 5 is that nutrients can become biological response modifiers. Back in 1971, when Richard Nixon launched the war on cancer, he said, "We will have a cure for a major cancer within 5 years by the bicentennial, 1976. We don't have a cure for any major cancer today either. We have some better treatments, but essentially launching the war on cancer, and we have now spent in the neighborhood of $50 billion on research at the National Cancer Institute, and over $1 trillion in therapies, and we now have 40% of men born today can expect to develop cancer in their lifetime. In the year 1900, 3% could expect to develop cancer in their lifetime. We got a problem there. But one of the things we know from cancer research and nutrition research is that nutrients can become biological response modifiers. They change the way the body works. A blatant example of that would be every fall in America, August, September, about 30 young men athletes will die from heat stroke. They're big people, they're not properly hydrated, they're out in 80, 90, 100, 110 degree heat, they're practicing twice a day, they don't hydrate properly, and they can die from dehydration. The only cure for heat stroke or dehydration is water. And so water becomes a biological response modifier in those patients. There are many cancer patients for whom fish oil, coenzyme Q, lipoic acid, curcumin, there's just a long list of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, probiotics, glandular extracts, many different substances that can become powerful therapeutic aids for the cancer patient to restore their host defense mechanisms. Because here's the beauty. A healthy human body is self-regulating and self-repairing. Now, the cancer patient has lost that ability for some reason. The job of everyone in the hospital and everyone in the clinic should be to restore that patient back to their self-regulating and self-repairing ability, which is what nutrition does as part of the package.
So nutrients can change the way that a body works. They're biological response modifiers, and a healthy body should be self-regulating and self-healing. Let's listen to Dr. Sherry Tenpenny as she discusses the relationship of nutrition to cervical cancer and the HPV vaccine.
And that brings up another point. Does the virus cause the cancer, or is the cervix, which is an exposed organ, has a nutritional deficiency? The organ starts to break down and deteriorate, and then the virus gets embedded into that decaying and sick organ. And the medical community says that the HPV caused the cancer, when in actuality, I believe that a lot of cervical dysfunction and cervical dysplasias are nutritional deficiency diseases. And we've treated many of them in our office with vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin C, natural progesterone, other types, and you get them to stop smoking, get off the birth control pill, and it clears up and goes away.
Wow.
In more than 90% of people that we have kept track of.
So when you give the body what it needs to run properly, it runs
Imagine
properly.
that. Imagine that.
Wow.
I suggest, number one, let's go back to the basics. I think one of my jobs as a doctor is to counsel people on how to eat appropriately. And I can guarantee you most people are not eating appropriately. And their diets, the standard American diet, is nutrient depleting for people. It supplies them with toxic chemicals that set the stage for chronic illness like cancer and arthritis and other illnesses to appear. And unless they learn to, number one, eat appropriately or eat better, I think that we're going to still suffer this cancer problem. Basic number one is let's eat a better diet. And when we were growing up, we learned in elementary school the food pyramid.
Yeah.
And the food pyramid showed that we should eat the majority of our food as grains. And remember, there was a big loaf of bread there and crackers, and grains were down in that big part of the food pyramid, and fats and oils were up on top, and says use sparingly. Well, I could tell you we followed that food pyramid since it was introduced. I believe it was introduced in the early 1970s or late 1960s. And the consequences of us, the American people, following this food pyramid was that we ate more grains. We limited our fats and oils in our diet. We switched our fat intake from primarily animal fat products to using polyunsaturated vegetable oils like corn oil and soybean oil and some other oils that are commonly sold in the grocery stores. And the consequences of that is we become the most obese people on the face of the planet. We have more diabetes than we know what to do with. We have more metabolic syndrome than we know what to do with. And I say it's a direct result of following the USDA's recommendation of following the food pyramid.
Following the sad American diet.
It makes people sad, and it makes people fat, and it makes people diabetic. And certainly once diabetes comes on to play, cancer and other illnesses follow suit as the blood sugar goes up, since cancer cells require blood sugar to function, to rev their metabolic rate.
So Dr. B, you just mentioned the sad American diet, the fact that we got the pyramid with the grains and the oils at the top, very few used sparingly. What should a healthy food pyramid look like?
Well, in one sense, maybe we could flip the food pyramid on its axis and make the grains used sparingly, because grains turn into sugar very quickly, and I frequently tell my patients to limit grains in the diet and to use a lot more fat in their diet, because fat slowly releases into the body. And so what should it look like? I say people should eat whole foods, free of pesticides, free of hormones.
Organic.
And organic food, absolutely. And organic animal products can be very healthy for people, such as organic eggs and organic meats and organic, any organic product. And it definitely needs to be free of pesticides, because we know pesticides are not metabolized well in the body. There's carcinogenic studies with pesticides if we get enough of them in our body. And certainly with the hormones they're feeding the animals and the conventionally raised animals, that's a big problem. And I think that's one of the things that's causing 1 in 7 women to have breast cancer and 1 in 3 men to have prostate cancer.
And also, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking, so the hormones in the meats, the chickens, could that be one of the reasons that so many young girls are going into puberty so early?
Well, there's no question that's one of the reasons girls are going into puberty so early. There's no question that's why breast size has increased over the years. And there's no question that's why breast cancer has increased. And I say for men, it's prostate cancer. And there's no reason they need to feed these hormones to the animals. They should be limited. And since they are going to feed them to conventionally raised animals, the only thing we can do is to eat a better diet.
Dr. B, I know you've written several books on diet and food and nutrition, so can you talk about those a little bit?
Well, I've written these books because trying to teach people not to eat that sad diet and to eat a better diet. So the first book, the first book that I wrote was A Guide to Healthy Eating. And just give an overview about how to eat better, like what we're talking about. And my latest book is The Skinny on Fats. And I try to dispel the myths of eating fat and why we need to eat good fats in our diet, why we can't go on these low-fat diets. I think it stresses the body out and causes more problems, and particularly more problems with people with chronic disorders like cancer.
Can you talk about good fats? When you say good fats, we need to be eating good fats. What are good fats?
So good fats can be from animal sources that are organically raised and organically fed.
Butter.
So butter is absolutely, butter is a good, very good fat for the body. Organic eggs are the best pure protein source for the body.
We have, I live on 5 acres in Texas, and we have laying hens. So we get fresh eggs every day from our hens at free range. So I'm with you. I love
That's the best way
eggs.
to do it, no question.
What about other kinds of oils to cook with? What oil should we cook with? What oil should we be intaking? I know that one of the oils that's a staple in our diet is coconut oil.
Well, we were taught in elementary school on the top of that food pyramid to use fats and oils sparingly. And we were also taught switch to polyunsaturated vegetable oils like corn oil and soybean oil and those things. Those things are a disaster for the body. They're nutrient depleted, they're full of trans fatty acids, they gum up the body's receptors. So I think the single best cooking oil is coconut oil. Palm oil is a good choice. These things survive high heat cooking very well. Olive oil is okay for low heat cooking or just in cool foods. For high heat cooking, there's nothing better than coconut oil.
Okay. We love to cook up organic popcorn in coconut oil. The kids get popcorn that way.
Nothing better with using coconut oil, organic corn seeds, and good salt, unrefined salt.
What about nuts? What are some good sources of fats? Because I know nuts are almost all fat. So what's good sources of fats?
I think nuts make a great snack. They supply the right fatty acids for our bodies, both omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. And nuts can be a healthy snack source, much better than a cracker or some kind of grain-based product.
But would you recommend with the nuts, should they be raw nuts or roasted are okay, but not roasted in bad oils, of course, or not cooked in bad oils?
So what I tell my patients is that nuts do have some chemicals in them to inhibit some of the absorption of minerals in our body. They're called phytates. You can minimize that or disrupt that phytate formation by slow roasting the nuts. So in my book, The Guide to Healthy Eating, we describe how to slow roast nuts. And basically you just put them on a tray, cook them at low heat for a few hours, and it makes them much more tastier and much more healthier for our body. But I do think raw nuts can be an okay snack as well.
Okay, but just watch out for the bad oils.
Oh yeah, the nuts, if you look on the container of the nuts, they'll tell you when they're made with soybean oil and they're roasted. If they're roasted in soybean oil or corn oil or something like that, they're not going to be healthy because the oil's been hydrogenated at that point.
And now the GMO factor as well, right, with soy and corn.
That's been a whole disaster, and we're paying the price for that as well.
So Dr. Brownstein just elaborated on good oils and healthy fats. Let's listen to Bob Wright and Suzanne Summers expound on this subject. Talk about the good oils like coconut oil.
Well, first of all, if you go into a supermarket and you see all the oils there, the sunflower, the safflower, the canola oil. Folks, canola oil is rapeseed oil. It's used as a pesticide. It's poison. But most of these bottles of oils and cans, whatever, sitting on the shelves in there are already rancid before you buy them. They put industrial perfumes in them to make them smell good, you know. Don't eat them. The good oils, of course, are olive oil, extra virgin olive oil particularly. I always like extra virgin because it's the least processed. But you got to be careful today. Like 50% of the extra virgin olive oils out there have other oils in them. So you've got to know what you're choosing. But I like extra virgin coconut oil. And I have a couple tablespoons every day because we're seeing remarkable things with people with neurodegenerative diseases like ALS and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And we're seeing almost immediate results with people that use these. The folks that are listening to this can go up on the internet and Google this, and you can find the stories. They're just rife on the internet now about how these people are utilizing these oils, 2 to 6 tablespoons a day, and they're seeing results in 20 minutes. Of course, you need to do more than one day, you know, to get in 20 minutes to get results. But we're finding that many people are getting incredible results all the way to almost reversing their sickness and disease. And boy, this is a great start because there are no drugs out there that, as we know, help these people. They may ameliorate a few symptoms for a little while, but these diseases progress. Also, we need to detox. We need to get those heavy metals out of the body. But this extra virgin coconut oil, the brain in these diseases stops really utilizing glucose, and the brain starts to struggle and suffer for energy. So the medium chain triglycerides, these good fats that we talk about in the coconut oil, are processed in the liver and sent into the bloodstream, and they go to the brain, and they become that fuel for the brain, so the brain starts to function again.
I probably have 4 spoons of coconut oil just on its own during the day, because that's so healing to the intestines. And then I use it in my cooking. Coconut oil is incredible. In my Suzanne Organic skincare line, we have coconut oil in so many of the products. My products are certified toxic free. I don't know of anybody else who has that organic. And so certified toxic free means it has to be grown organically, extracted organically, and nothing upwind or downwind of the product can be toxic to contaminate it. And I'm developing a nice little business of people who want high quality cosmetics and skincare and makeup, and don't want any chemicals. You know, I think about lead women have taken in through lipstick over the years. I make lead-free lipstick.
Oh, it's phenomenal. So coconut oil is not just great to eat, it's also good for your skin, as Suzanne just talked about, because your skin absorbs whatever touches it. And so if you're putting toxic makeups and perfumes on your skin, you're going to absorb them as well. Now, while we're on the subject of healthy fats, I wanted to talk to Dr. David Jockers, who's an expert on the ketogenic diet, which really relies on healthy fats to help the body work the way that it's supposed to. You have mentioned with the ketosis and the ketogenic diet, to me it sounds almost like the Atkins diet, if you remember from 20 years ago or so when the Atkins diet was real popular.
Yep.
Is it the same thing as the Atkins diet, or what is different when you hear the ketogenic diet versus the old Atkins diet that a lot of bodybuilders that I knew back in the 90s went from the low-fat diet to the Atkins diet, where they were literally guys that were at the gym were working out, eating cheese and bacon and peanut butter in between sets.
Yep.
What's the difference between these two types of diets?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm really glad you brought that up, because in general, Atkins diet is a ketogenic diet. It does stimulate ketone development. And the way that some individuals teach it, it's still, they're almost identical. However, when we're really trying to promote optimal health, we've got to make some differentiations from the Atkins diet. So where Atkins went right was his approach with a low carbohydrate diet, getting our body running off the ketones. So I'm in total agreement with him about that, keeping our body very sensitive to insulin. Very, very important. However, where I disagree with him was he really had no regulation on the kind of fats that you put into your body. And we want to really focus on good fats as opposed to bad fats. So most people in our society assume that saturated fat is a bad fat. What we know is that actually saturated fat is one of the most healthiest fats we can be putting in our body. The fats we really want to avoid are high omega-6 fats from refined vegetable oils and also from factory farmed animal meats. So that's a big one. And then of course, trans fats or man-made fats. And so we certainly want to make sure we're avoiding those things. And so we're going to load up on good fats, things like avocados, things like coconut oil, butter from grass-fed cows, okay? Individuals that can tolerate dairy protein, if they can tolerate casein, we're going to use things like cheese, raw cheese from grass-fed cows, fermented dairy drinks from, again, grass-fed cows. There's a huge difference between when a cow is fed grass and grains. A grain-fed cow actually grows much larger and produces a lot more dairy. In fact, they produce about 20 to 30,000 pounds of dairy in a year, a grain-fed cow. A grass-fed cow produces about 3,000 to 5,000 pounds. There's a huge difference in yield. Now, the grain-fed cow, though, the grains themselves are high in this omega-6 fat. And omega-6 fat causes inflammation in our body. So the dairy that's coming from a grain-fed cow is very high in omega-6, very low in omega-3. That's going to be inflammatory. And that inflammatory process, high omega-6, low omega-3, provides a ripe environment for cancer cell development in our body. So we definitely want to stay away from commercially raised animal products and animals that were fed grains. We want to stay away from that. But we do want the grass-fed animal products because they have a lot of omega-3s, an ideal ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s. Also, grass-fed dairy has a molecule called CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, which many researchers are finding is a potent anti-carcinogen. There's also other great nutrients in there. For example, the major fat that's in grass-fed dairy is called butyric acid. Butyric acid is a preferred fuel source for healthy gut microbes in your system. And it helps your intestinal cells to develop and actually to strengthen. So that way, we don't develop problems like leaky gut syndrome and ulcerations in our gut and things like that, which is extremely important for helping our immune system. 70% of our immune system's in our gut. And if we have damage to our gut, we're going to have a lot of immune system disorders, which could include cancer and other autoimmune diseases. So this grass-fed raw dairy can have an incredible effect at helping the gut to heal and seal and to control itself well. So that's why it's such a good fat source we want to include. We also want to include things like extra virgin olive oil, healthy seeds like flaxseed, hemp seeds, chia seeds. We talked about coconut products. That should be an absolute staple. Coconut is a superfood, very anti-inflammatory and just powerful for our body. So these are the kind of good fats we want to focus on. We want to stay away from, again, you know, Atkins never differentiated between grass-fed and grain-fed. So it was a lot of commercial animal products using lard and bacon and things like that. And the other aspect of it is that bacon, I am really not a big fan of, just from the perspective that it is cooked at very high temperatures. And it may be nitrate-free, which is certainly a better one to go with. But when you cook meat at a very high temperature, you're going to produce a lot of carcinogenic products. Things like heterocyclic amines, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, acrylamide, and these are known to cause cancer growth in our body. And so high heat or highly cooked, highly processed animal products, even if it's properly raised, can also be a factor with cancer cell development. So we want to look for animal products that have been minimally processed, and when we cook them, we want to cook them more medium rare, so a lower temperature, and just cooking them for less time, so that way we produce less of those heterocyclic amines. And there are a lot of different strategies that people can apply with marinades and things like that to utilize the animal products and minimize the production of carcinogenic chemicals.
Do you ever recommend fasting?
Oh yeah,
for
absolutely.
For health and for cancer patients.
Absolutely. You know, and you just brought that up. And so just talking about the ketogenic cleanse, I mean, it is a fast. And I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting. It's something I do every single day. And I think it's a critical piece of a cancer-killing diet. So for myself, you know, really when we break down fasting, I want all our listeners to understand this. I look at a building phase and a cleansing phase. So our building phase is a time between our first meal of the day and our last meal of the day. Okay, so the typical American, they might eat at 8 a.m. and finish eating at 8 p.m. So it's about a 12-hour building phase. And the cleansing phase would be time from our last meal to our first meal. Okay, that's like a 1-to-1 ratio. In our society today, we've got so much toxicity that it's that much more important that we have a greater cleansing phase than building phase. On top of that, the great thing is when we're on this ketogenic diet, our hormones become balanced. Insulin and leptin, which is our satiety hormone, so it helps us say that we're no longer hungry, we're satisfied. They become very balanced, our body becomes very sensitive to it. So we're really not as hungry. And so for myself, I like to have anywhere between a 16 to 18 hour and sometimes even a 24-hour cleansing phase on a regular basis. Okay, like we're doing this interview here, it's 11:30, 12 o'clock. I haven't eaten anything yet today. I worked out this morning, and you know what? My blood sugar is extremely stable. I feel really good. I feel really mentally clear. Now, I'll typically eat around 1 o'clock or so, and then finish eating by, let's say, 6, 7 o'clock. And so that's really my building phase. And so I've gotten all the nutrients I need, but my body's also been able to really cleanse and detoxify as I've gone through this cleansing phase. And on the cleansing phase, like for example, the fasting this morning, I've drank probably about a half gallon of water so far today. So the water is key because I want to move toxins out of my body. I don't want them to just recirculate as they're being released as my body's breaking down fat cells.
Interesting information on fasting from Dr. Jockers. And he mentioned grass-fed meat several times. Why is that important? Because you are what you eat. Animals are what they eat. Let's listen to Dr. Ben Johnson describe why it's so important that animals are properly raised. What does your diet look like?
My diet that I want my patients to eating looks green, very green. Vegetables, lots of vegetables, all kinds of vegetables in all forms. But key to that is the fresher the better. So cutting to you, the less time the better. If you have your own garden, that's awesome. And then secondly is organic, because you don't want those pesticides and chemicals and artificial fertilizers and things working against you.
Okay.
So fresh, raw, organic are the keys. Vegetables, and then nuts and fruits. And I do allow my patients to eat small portions of meat. I want it to be organic, free range, or wild caught, harvested.
Okay. So the way that the animals are raised affects the meat.
You know, we have all these studies showing that 2 eggs a week causes increase in prostate cancer, and red meat causes colon cancer, and all of these studies. But you don't see anybody comparing organic free-range eggs against pin-fed chickens. You don't see the free-range meat again. So I would love to see those studies done. Of course, no drug company is going to fund those, and no independent farmer has the money to do that. I don't think the meat, the eggs, the things are the problem. I think it's what we do to them. We put a chicken or a cow in a pen or a hog, and we feed them genetically modified corn. That's not their diet. I mean, they're out there eating grass, including the chickens and crickets, and so they're out there eating things that when we raise them commercially, that's not what we're feeding them. So now they have concentrated, genetically modified corn and other chemicals in their body, and then we eat that and concentrate it in ours.
Wow.
So I don't think it's I'm not a vegetarian. I have no problem with vegetarians as long as they get adequate amounts of protein, which is sometimes difficult to do unless they're educated as to how to get those. Sure. And there are certain amino acids that you just don't find in vegetables at all. But we have nice supplements these days, so you can go to a supplement store and get those. So I don't have a problem with a patient being a vegetarian, but I certainly don't have a problem with them being omnivorian because we need protein, especially our immune systems need protein. I just want it to be healthy protein.
I don't know about you, but when I eat some good grass-fed meat or some pastured poultry, I like to put some spices on it. One of the spices that I like to include is sodium. And we've heard a lot of bad things about sodium. It's gotten a bad rap. It's been demonized. You should not include sodium in your diet. But is that true? Let's listen to a man who's written a book on sodium, Dr. David Brownstein. Dr. B, I know you've written a book about salt. What bearing does that have on our conversation here?
Well, Ty, we've been talking about sort of doing the basics, eating a better diet. One of the other basics is making sure you maintain adequate hydration, drink enough water. Taking iodine I consider one of the basics, and salt is one of the 4 basic things people need. Our bodies need and acquire adequate amounts of salt daily. Salt's the second major constituent next to water in our body. The immune system can't function well without salt. The hormonal system can't function well without salt. And iodine can't work in the body without adequate amounts of salt. So I consider salt one of the basics. I check salt levels on every patient that comes in the door. I can tell you the vast majority are salt deficient. And so when I talk about salt, as I write about in my book, Salt Your Way to Health, there's good and bad salt. I would say an inadequate form of salt is refined salt. It's the little white crystals that we're all used to. Yeah. They fit in the salt shaker and they're real fine and they contain a little bit of iodine, but they only contain sodium and chloride, a little bit of iodine, and then they have toxic chemicals such as ferrocyanide. They have some bleach properties, bleach chemicals in them to make it white.
Make it white.
That's not a good product. A better product is unrefined salt, which has over 80 minerals in it, lesser amounts of sodium and chloride. It doesn't have a lot of iodine in it, so therefore you need to supplement with iodine. But this is a staple that people need in their diets. The adrenal system can't function well without salt, the thyroid system can't function well without salt, and the immune system can't function well without salt. And iodine works much better in the body with salt, as salt helps to usher out bromide and fluoride in the body while you take iodine.
Okay. Wow. So many diets that I've heard about, people that think they're getting healthy, they say, okay, I'm not eating any more salt. not a good idea.
It is not a good, not only is it not a good idea, it's a disastrous idea. And eventually the adrenals get overstressed from this and don't function well. But it's not good for the immune system. It's not good for fighting cancer.
Okay.
And people need salt in their diet. You know, it's a staple. Human beings have needed salt since the beginning of time. We were designed by our maker to need salt.
Right.
How much salt? About a teaspoon a day for most people. The latest studies that just came out in New England Journal of Medicine verified what I've been saying for the last 15 years. You know, I blog about this and I write about it in my newsletter.
Yeah.
You know, as those studies came out, you know, you can look at the curves. It's very easy to look at them. You see high mortality rate on the low end of salt intake, and then it goes down. And it doesn't really matter how much salt you use. Maybe at very high rates there's problems, but people aren't going to eat that amount of salt. They just need the right kind of salt, which is unrefined salt, such as Celtic brand sea salt, Redmond's real salt, the Himalayan salt. I've tested all 3 versions of those 4 times. I didn't find toxic agents, and I found adequate amounts of minerals in all of those kinds. I think those are very healthy forms of salt.
Dr. Brownstein mentions that one of his 4 pillars is that you drink plenty of water, which only makes sense since your body is 75% water. So you technically are what you drink, aren't you?
If we really look at our body, 3/4 of our body is water, if we're properly hydrated. Most people are not. We know that 70 to 80% of America is chronically dehydrated, so that's another whole problem. But why is water important? Water, believe it or not, functions in every system. From joints to the brain to the blood is 93% water. So people don't think, even down to the bones are 13 to 22% water. So water is everywhere in our system, and it's critical to health that we are properly hydrated. When we are not properly hydrated, our metabolic rate is reduced, our thought processes are reduced, the toxins that we are supposed to be removing are not happening. And so our bodies are taxed and burdened with having to do that in other ways. And so we end up with skin issues. We end up with a lot of different pathology just as a result of chronic dehydration, because we're not putting water in. I call water our filtration system for our body. So when we bring water in to our system, we want to void out that same amount of water, but take some things with it that we didn't want in our body in the first place. And that's the way I look at water. And if water is structured properly, it will do that. Free radicals are missing an electron.
Okay.
Our cells function electrically. Our bodies are electric, and we have a lot of electricity and electrons that are flowing in our system. And ultimately, without electrons, cells don't function properly. And the way free radicals harm us is they go and steal electrons from healthy cells.
So a free radical is what? It's what is missing an electron? It's
an oxygen.
Oxygen.
So a free radical is an oxygen missing one of its 8 electrons, so it only has 7 electrons.
So typically oxygen has 8 electrons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and a free radical is an oxygen atom that is missing one of them.
That's right.
Okay.
So what it will do is it will go throughout the body and steal electrons from healthy cells that are weaker than the oxygen itself.
Okay.
And take it from it. Well, when it does that, that cell no longer functions appropriately or can't function at all, depending on what kind of cell it is.
Okay.
So that's why free radicals harm our system, is if we take out a percentage of our cells not functioning, we lessen the entire effectiveness of our system. It's like taking part of your engine away in a vehicle. It's not going to go.
Right.
So in our body being taxed and taxed and taxed, not only toxins, but we're actually oxidizing our cells, or that's what free radicals do, is they're stealing electrons, and electrons are the fuel. It's got to function electrically. You've got to have those electrons. So when we have water that's properly structured with a negative electrical charge, for instance, there's a net gain or an increase of 1 electron, which can be donated to complete those free radicals. It's basically what an antioxidant does. Any antioxidant that people are choosing has an extra electron, and that's how antioxidants function with the cellular system.
So then they donate that extra electron to the oxygen atom that's missing the electron.
To the free radicals. Yep.
Okay, and it basically completes the oxygen atom.
That's right.
So your blood is 93% water. Wow. And properly structured water acts as an antioxidant and is rich in minerals, delivering them to your body. Minerals are important. Let's listen to some experts talk about the difference between the old diet, the primitive diet, and our modern diet, full of fast foods and virtually worthless foods.
There's over 300 studies showing that a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can dramatically lower the risk for most cancers. That should be enough evidence. Meanwhile, the United States Department of Agriculture claims that the top 3 most commonly consumed vegetables in America is ketchup, French fries, and onion rings. And I know that sounds humorous because those are not vegetables in my opinion. They're highly processed. Ketchup is mostly sugar, corn syrup, and the others are high in hydrogenated fats. So there's very few vegetables and fruits being consumed. The government sort of bends rules to basically accommodate big business.
If you look at every simple, I'm using the word simple rather than primitive, or Aboriginal society, cancer is unknown. Now, there was a famous Harvard researcher called William Stephenson. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. So obviously Norwegian or Swedish name.
Works
but I
for me.
think my best shot is William Stephenson. And he lived with Eskimos for about 30 years. I shouldn't say Eskimos, Inuit, but you know what I mean. He lived with them, and he ate their food and lived their lifestyle. And at first he couldn't tolerate the diet. It was about 50% fat. You know, it was just slopping with grease in the dish. And so he said, no, I can't take it. I'll eat more the Western way. And within a few weeks, he was pretty sick. And he had to eat that way. As soon as he did, his body recovered enormously. And he was really fit and well. He was out on the ice, you know, he could walk 50 miles in a day. He was, you know, really fit man for his age. And brought back, you know, a very interesting story and wrote a book. But basically, in all his time in that territory, he never saw a case of cancer. And it's pretty well unknown amongst the Inuit. It's only when they came into the bases, you know, started eating the burgers and the colas, that they started to get diabetes, heart disease, cancer, the same as the rest of us. And that's a picture that repeats itself all over the world. Do you know Albert Schweitzer, the famous humanitarian? He went to work in the Gabon in Africa, and he said he never saw a case of cancer in anyone that was, you know, living the natural lifestyle. He directly attributed it to food. He was pretty sure that was the reason. They just eat differently. And, you know, you've got your... It's tempting to think, well, it's genetic. You know, the Inuits are just strong against cancer. And they do eat a lot of selenium, you know, from the seafood. We know that's protected. But the real killer in the story, Ty, is if they go and move into a different environment, eat somebody else's diet, they get sick as dogs, just the same as the rest of us. So it's not really a genetic factor. But, you know, that's pretty stark epidemiological evidence. You almost don't need any other cause of cancer if you know that people living the natural lifestyle in the Stone Age or Aboriginal way, like a hunter-gatherer, and keeping their lifestyle pure, never gets cancer.
Our food has been hijacked. Our food has been degraded to the point where it no longer holds the nutrition that a human body needs for support. And nutrition is the fuel of the body, so the higher quality of food you put in, the more your body will operate at max. It's all kind of simple.
It makes too much sense, doesn't it?
Right. I was doing a radio interview the other day, and they're talking about the obesity epidemic with children, and I said, let's just stop for a minute. Do you really think by giving kids smaller sodas and less French fries that that's going to tackle the obesity issue? I said, no one wants to call it what it is. The kids are eating chemicals, processed foods, packaged foods, and, you know, chemicals. Like, I remember when I was interviewing Dr. Russell Blaylock, he said they design chemicals to taste scrumptious. Yeah. He said, so if that's the first food the kid gets, he said, you have to bribe them to get a floret of broccoli in them and a piece of chicken so that they can have the foods they really love. And that's what needs to happen in schools, is education about there are no safe levels of chemicals for any human body. That needs to just be known.
I agree with Suzanne Summers. We are what we eat, and if we eat chemicals, we're going to become chemicals. Let's listen to cancer survivor Chris Wark share how he cured his cancer, changing only his nutrition.
And so what did my diet look like? It was very simple, you know, and I think a hardcore nutritional approach to cancer needs to be very simple, because there are a lot of options out there. It can get very complicated, and a lot of people have, they're seeing so many different directions they don't even know where to go, and they get paralyzed. And so I realized, okay, what is the most fundamental, foundational part of my healing approach? And that's food. I've got to get as much nutrition in my body as I can from the earth. And so I started juicing, and I drank about 64 ounces of vegetable juice every day, mostly carrot juice. I ate giant salads full of cruciferous and allium vegetables. That's broccoli, cauliflower, kale, cabbage, onions, garlic, peppers, right? Just spinach, all that good stuff.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Making me
just
hungry.
the amazing giant salad. We shared one at Jason's Deli recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a giant salad full of like all this really amazing food from the earth that was put here for us. And I ate that twice a day. And then I would make fruit smoothies with a fresh coconut and berries, 2 cups of blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries. Berries are very potent anti-cancer fruits. And that was it. That was the daily diet. And it was every day, and I did that for 90 days. It was 100% raw food for 90 days.
What does an anti-cancer diet look like in your office?
Well, we teach our patients, I'm not the nutritionist, but I do instruct patients. First of all, you have to eat foods, mostly vegetables, okay? I don't care if they eat fruits, but you have to eat a low sugar diet because cancer feeds off of sugar. Dr. Otto Warburg won a Nobel Prize, said that cancer cells thrive in a fermentative energy source, which is sugar. Sugar on the cancer cells, the receptor sites for sugar. That's how we do a PET scan. When you give a PET scan, you give it radiotrace glucose, and the cancer cells light up or they don't light up. And they light up because they're eating the sugar, or they don't. So you got to get people off sugar. People are addicted to sugar. Sugar is a poison, it's a toxin, and it paralyzes the cell from doing their job. We have this blood test called the hemoglobin A1C, which is a reflection of your blood sugar over 90 days. It is an aging marker. Your body has what they call glycosylation taking place. We know that at a certain number, with the electron microscopy, Johns Hopkins has written on this, that the cells change after a hemoglobin A1C greater than 5.0, which is considered ideal. So you have to get off sugar. I don't care how you slice it. You've got to get off. Yeah, there are people that can eat sugar and they have great blood sugars. Okay, luckily they're blessed, but most people are not. I mean, if you look at the statistics, 70, 80 million people are pre-diabetic. So that means they're already very increased risk of cancer. Then you have the diabetics. Then if you look at children, 1 in 3 children after the year 2000 have diabetes. Okay, the complications of diabetes are everything. Your eyes, your circulation, your heart, your immune system, everything is non-functional. Amputation of limbs, probably that's the #1 reason for amputation of limbs is from high blood sugar. So you got to get off sugar, and then you got to get off the things that turn into sugar. So the things that turn into sugar are bread, rice, pasta, and potatoes.
It's illogical. Because, you know, most cancer patients will say, I went for chemo and the doctor and the nurse told me any calorie is a good calorie. Eat this cake, eat this cookie, eat this donut, just keep the weight on. Totally oblivious to the very well-articulated, clearly demonstrated biochemical truths about don't eat sugar, don't feed cancer. So I'm not a fan of the current standard of care for cancer, and I can assure you that most oncologists, if they were honest with you, would say the same thing. They might say it's the best they have, but they're not happy with it. I don't think anybody's happy with 2.1 or 2.3% benefit over 5 years, which is what the research shows chemotherapy will give to an adult.
Again, Dr. Brad Weeks shared the 5-year success rate of chemotherapy, 2.1%. Not very good, is it? And what about processed foods? You know, the foods that are on the shelves, they have 50+ ingredients, you can't pronounce most of the words. Should we eat those? Let's listen to Dr. Rashid Buttar. Question for you. You mentioned earlier one of the toxicities involves the food toxicities, and you mentioned genetically modified foods. Let's talk about that. If you've got a patient that's a cancer patient, what do you recommend as far as their diet and whether or not they should eat genetically modified foods? What kind of a cancer diet would you recommend for somebody to, let's say, prevent cancer as opposed to treat it? Just a cancer preventative type diet.
Clean.
So they should wash their food? Is that what you're saying by clean?
Clean as possible, meaning that it should be organic, range-fed.
Okay.
In my book, The 9 Steps to Keep the Doctor Away, I actually specifically talk about food. And people have asked me many times, when are you going to write a more detailed book on food? And I said, I've actually got one written on that too, but I'm never going to put that out. Why? Because I want people to become empowered rather than becoming dependent on a book. So it's a very, very simple rule. G stands for God. M stands for man. If God made it, it's good. If man made it, it's madness. Simply follow that rule. So if it's butter, and doctors say don't eat butter, it's fat, this, that, it's not man-made, it's God-made, eat it. If it's margarine, it's man-made, use it for lubrication in your car's axle, but don't use it for anything else, okay? So that's my general rule. High protein, lower carbohydrates, because protein is part of how the body regenerates itself, whereas carbohydrates are fuel. We have too much fuel in our diet nowadays. We needed more fuel when we were more back in our Paleolithic ancestry, but that's because we had to hunt our food. You know, we don't hunt our hamburgers now, and so we don't really need as much fuel anymore. So you need more of rebuilder protein component, and you need less of the carbohydrate fuel component.
Okay.
So that my general rule is man-made, madness, God-made, good. Eat as clean as you can, meaning organic, range-fed, etc. Fruits, vegetables. If you're going to eat meat, then eat range-fed meat, and eat as healthy as possible. And people know, when you start explaining that to them, well, what about reading ingredients? Well, read the ingredients. Well, how do I know what's good for me and what's bad for me? If there's two things in the food that you're eating that you don't know what they are, that's enough to say, I'm not going to eat it. Now, I happen to know a little bit more than the average bear, so when I'm reading it, I understand some more of those things. So I may, you know, if I know, you know, if there's EDT, if it says ethylene diamine tetracetic acid, I'll still eat it because that's what I infuse into patients anyway. You know, it's a chelator, so I'm not worried about it. It's a preservative. But there's certain things that if my rule is for general people, if you don't know more than 2 ingredients, don't eat it.
A whole food, predominantly plant-based diet is an anti-cancer diet, period. There are more anti-cancer medicines in a diverse whole food diet than the cancer industry will ever come up with, regardless of how many billions of dollars they spend on research. There are anti-cancer compounds in celery, anti-cancer compounds in beets, anti-cancer compounds in the white stuff inside the orange peel. When you peel the orange peeling off, you should leave that white layer on the oranges, on the pieces. Eat as much of that as possible. It's anti-cancer. Anti-cancer elements in red wine and red grapes, resveratrol, we talked about. Anti-cancer elements in seeds and nuts. There's so many that modern science, it'll take us hundreds of years to even begin to understand the anti-cancer potential that's found in a grocery store right now. The other big aha in all of this is that it gets us back to the amazing power of a common sense whole food diet. That when you look at, hey, there might be toxins in some of these foods, but if you actually eat whole foods, there are natural things in there that will absorb the toxins without you even knowing about it. So as I have done this research, what it has really done is given me more and more respect for Mother Nature and more amazement at how nature achieves balance and protects your body from toxins in the environment through things that you never were even aware of. I mean, whoever knew eating strawberries as a kid that strawberries were blocking the mercury?
We just thought they tasted good.
Exactly. Exactly.
I believe that in 50 years we're going to look back at food now the way we look at smoking 50 years ago. You know, there was commercials with doctors with cigarettes in their hand saying that cigarettes are good for you, and we would all agree that that's laughable now, you know, that that's absolute insanity and criminal, you know. And I think that's probably what we're going to be saying about processed foods and McDonald's and sodas and things like that 50 years from now, how crazy it was that we'd freely put that stuff into our body, you know, and build up a level of toxicity, probably similar in some ways, it may be even worse in some ways than from cigarettes, from smoking cigarettes.
I agree with Dr. Sawhney. The standard American diet today will one day be looked upon as ridiculous as smoking cigarettes, literally giving us disease.
For me, it's very important what goes in. That means also purifying, cleaning the water. Talk about structuring the water as well, because there's an energy to water. That's why homeopathy is so amazing. That goes beyond merely filtering it and cleaning it. So there are other nuances to protecting ourselves from cancer. There's always something more to do. But at the proverbial end of the day, just do what you have genuine control over, right? You can't do that which you can't. That you can turn over to God, pray on it. But that which you have control over, we are asked to do. We can't slack off on that which we have genuine control over, to choose cleaner foods, to choose cleaner waters, to not do certain things that we know are self-destructive. These are within our power. We're asked to do that. We can't abuse the privilege of life and say, well, nah, I don't want to do that one. Ultimately, we have to take control over that which we have been granted and given control over.
And one of the things that we have been given control over is the quality and the amount of food that we put into our mouths. This next quick interview with Dr. Irvin Sani is an excellent example of putting into practice the knowledge that you have been given. I'm here in Austin, Texas tonight with Dr. Irvin Sani. Dr. Sani, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, you look a lot different than you did about 5 months ago. You were a participant in the Quest for the Cures, and you shared a lot of information, valuable information with us, but you've lost a lot of weight since then.
I think it's the goatee.
The goatee? Well, you do have a goatee that you didn't have before, but can you tell us what else has happened between last May and current day?
No, yeah, you guys, the whole project really inspired me. I probably was a little less than completely satisfied with the way I looked on camera, but I was also inspired and interested in improving my overall health, and that resulted in some pretty significant weight loss. So a lot of it I got from the Quest for the Cures, and some of it I got from some research that I did on my own, primarily some intermittent fasting.
What was it specifically in the Quest for the Cures that you learned about that got you on that road?
I can't remember which speaker it was, but I heard about the ketogenic diet.
Dr. David Jockers.
David Jockers,
okay.
And I implemented something called intermittent fasting, and that basically, in my case, I chose to use a window of about 6 hours, and that 6 hours can slide a little bit, but for me it was between noon and 6 o'clock, and so I would only eat between 12 and 6, and outside that window I only drank water. Now conceptually separate from that, I also eliminates probably a little too difficult, but I minimized dramatically carbohydrates, sugars and carbohydrates from my diet down to about 25 grams a day, in some cases even 15 grams a day, and that's pretty tough if you're eating some vegetables, to go much lower than that.
And so what's the purpose in eliminating the carbohydrates?
Well, carbohydrates have a number of effects, and I think some of this was covered in the Quest for the Cures, but it spikes your insulin. And so when you get up in the morning and you have a big bowl of cereal, you spike your insulin, and then you're hungry as your insulin comes back down very quickly. So you have a bowl of Fruit Loops at 8 o'clock in the morning, and now you're ready for lunch by 10:30 or 11, and that has a lot to do with the insulin. Sugar has an addictive effect for some people. It makes them want to keep eating. And the other thing I did is I also eliminated gluten from my diet. So I eliminated any form of wheat, breads, pasta, any form of wheat. And really, and I don't eat rice either. At that point, I wasn't eating much rice either. So I eliminated carbohydrate, sugar, and went on intermittent fasting diet. I didn't actually exercise because I wanted to separate diet from exercise so I could sort of figure out how much I could eat or the way I could eat in the absence of exercise. And now, of course, I've added exercise in for the last couple of months and seen even more dramatic effects. But yeah, I've lost about 50 pounds.
50 pounds,
yeah.
Which is like a third to a half of a normal person.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I had a big drop in my body fat, increase in my energy, look better, feel better, and I think I've also increased my insulin and leptin sensitivity. Yeah. I probably was pre-diabetic. I don't know that for sure, but I imagine that I probably was. Of course, I was overweight, and so I think also there's some obviously benefits for cancer, cancer prevention, sure. Boosting my immune system, and also reversing any sort of inflammatory. Sugar is very inflammatory, so I reduced my propensity to have a lot of different diseases, including cardiac disease. And so, I believe now, after the research that I've done, that cholesterol is not the major issue in cardiac disease. It is an issue, but I think sugar is an even more important issue. So I think your cholesterol is not, I'm not saying that it's not important, but when you minimize or eliminate sugar from your diet, the cholesterol becomes much less of an issue.
So you, a medical doctor, learned from the Quest for the Cures, you implemented that knowledge, and now you lost 50 pounds. And you were my college roommate, so you look as good as you did in college, just as healthy as you did in college. So it's great to see you this way. It's great to see you healthy again. And I really appreciate you joining us tonight to share your story.
Thanks a lot. Good. Thanks for having me.
Wow, that's an amazingly powerful story from Dr. Irvin Sani. The way that the Quest for the Cures back in the spring influenced him to such an extent, a medical doctor, that he totally changed his diet, and now he's lost 50 pounds. And I went to college with Dr. Sani. He looks as good as he did back in college, maybe even better. So what a great story to hear. What a great encouraging story for you, because you now understand, coming from a medical doctor story, that you are what you eat. Did you know that certain of the diagnostics that are used today to detect cancer actually cause cancer? They increase your risk of cancer. Do you know which tests are good, which tests are bad? There are many tests that are non-invasive tests that do not increase your risk of cancer, but many of them, as I said, do. Tomorrow night, you're going to learn which ones do. You're going to learn about the good tests, and you're going to learn about the tests that you should stay away from. And not only that, we're going to begin to teach you about natural treatments for cancer. As a matter of fact, there are so many natural treatments for cancer that the next 3 episodes are dedicated to that topic. I hope you learned a lot tonight, and I know you're going to learn a lot in tomorrow night's episode. So I hope to see you back tomorrow night. In the meantime, enjoy your evening, and God bless you all. By choosing to own this today, what you do is you not only support us and our mission to eradicate cancer once and for all, but you're going to provide your friends, your family, your loved one, someone that you care about with knowledge, with information that's going to be valuable to save their life potentially, or one of their friends' lives. I mean, the cancer is an epidemic. And as I've mentioned before, the World Health Organization said that in 2010, and this was a statistic from 2010, that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 2 men that are alive are going to face a cancer diagnosis. So everyone needs this information. Be a hero. If you give somebody this information, it saves their life. I mean, that's the definition of what a hero is. You know, many people have been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and they've come across these treatments, they've come across this information, and they're alive 10, 15, some of them 20 or 30 years down the road. So I urge you to get a hold of this information, choose to own a copy today, and support us in our mission, and be a hero to someone that you love. Well, Marlon Glenn, my friend, I am so excited to be able to talk to you tonight. We're here outside of Detroit, Michigan.
Welcome to Detroit, Ty.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be able to wear this shirt. I told you a little story about almost losing the clothes.
I told you I had to apologize on behalf of Detroit. I wanted your first experience to be a good one, not luggage loss.
It has been good thus far, but I'm so excited to be able to talk to you tonight. What I wanted to do with you, Marlon, is get your perspective. You're a teacher in a local junior high school.
Correct.
And I know, based upon your past experience that you've told me, that you are trying to really help the kids clean up their diets.
That's true, Ty.
To be healthy through food.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that we focus on here with The Truth About Cancer, the quest for the cures continues, is we're trying to teach people how to eat well, eat clean.
Right.
To help them to realize the impact that nutrition has on their overall health. And you're trying to do that as well in your school system. So tell us a little bit about you and your family. You got a beautiful family here. They can't see them on camera, but they're watching us right now.
Right.
And tell us about your family and about what you're trying to do to help kids be healthy.
You know, Ty, a few years ago, you know, my sister, she passed away. You know, she had an aneurysm. And she was only 37 years old. And my wife and I, it kind of threw us for a loop, because when you have one of your siblings who's younger than you, when she dies, it kind of makes you contemplate things, and you kind of think about, well, you know, maybe I need to do a better job of taking care of myself. So, you know, I just jumped headlong into it. I changed everything. I probably changed too much too fast for my wife, because I got a little pushback. You know, when you change everything, we stopped the McDonald's, the fast food, the whole thing. The kids were like, what? Are you serious? We can't eat these things anymore? Are you kidding? But I was serious, because my mind had been made up about it. And as a father, and you're a father as well, Ty, you know how important it is for us to lead our families.
Right.
I have 2 daughters, I have a son, I have my wife, and I'm accountable for what we bring into the home and for what we do. So I took that responsibility seriously, and I said, okay, well then, if I'm going to embrace this change, it can't just be about, well, let Marlon be healthy. You know, I have to let the whole family be healthy. And then I take that same mindset into the schools. I work in urban districts. And in those districts, you know, they're known for very poor eating habits. I mean, you could see people coming in first thing in the morning, Ty, you see hot Cheetos, you see Twinkies, cupcakes, and this is breakfast. You know, they'll have a full 2-liter Mountain Dew, and that's what they're eating, and that's what they're drinking. And I said, you know, I can't just watch them do this and not say anything. You can't just educate the mind and not educate the entire body, the whole spirit with what's going on. So, you know, I told them one day, I said, okay, let me tell you what are you eating there? Oh, these are hot Cheetos, Mr. Glenn. This is so good, this is good. Can you pronounce what it's made out of? If you can pronounce every ingredient on the back of this bag, the next bag is on me. Nobody could do it.
I bet they could.
Nobody could pronounce it.
You got about 50 ingredients.
And they were just, the mindset has to be changed. You and Robert have all said it. We have to start with that mind. Changing how we look at things and changing how we react. At another school, I had a health fair. You know, I took the whole, and the funny thing is, Ty, if you say we're gonna have a basketball tournament, everybody comes. If it's a sporting event, everybody's there. I said I want to have a health fair. Initially, I got resistance because people are thinking, health?
What's a health fair?
Health fair? Who wants to come to that? That sounds boring. It's unimaginative. Nobody wants to do it. It was the most attended event of the school year.
Really?
It really was, because I got behind it. I found people who shared a vision. It's amazing when you have people who share your vision of a better life, because at its core, everybody wants a better life, but they may not understand how to get it. You know, we have to get beyond that marketing, and it's been my mission to try and help people. I'm not saying I'm an expert on anything. I'm not saying I know everything. I'm not saying that. But what I do know, I'm willing to share that.
I want you to share, this is something that really impressed me.
Okay.
A couple years ago when we first met in Chicago. Tell the story about when you gave your kids the opportunity, the choice. Did they want to go to learn more about their bodies and health at a health convention, or do they want to go to Disneyland?
Okay, very well. You know, we always listen. I've discovered Robert Scott Bell, you know, just kind of, you know, you surf on the web and one link leads to another, and one thing leads to something else. So I found Robert. So listened to his show, loved it. Downloaded all of his podcasts, and, you know, the kids went to school with me. So we drive to school every morning, and they're listening to Robert Scott Bell. And we know that you came on Wednesday. Dr. Patar was on Monday. Dr. Frank King was on Friday. They knew the schedule. So as we're driving, you know, summertime comes, and my wife is saying, well, you know, what's our family trip? What are we gonna do? My aunt in North Carolina, they always go to Disney. They wanted to go to Disney. You know, kids wanted to go. Oh, wife, she's hyped. Oh, we're going to Disney. We're going to Disney. I said, I looked at the calendar. I said, wait a minute. It's the same time as the health fair. She looked at me, Ty, she said, health fair.
Okay.
Health fair? We're going to the health fair? I said, no. She was mad. She was hot. But I told the kids, I said, what do you all want to do? I just laid it out there, Ty. I didn't coerce them. I don't know if it's because I was the dad. They may have been intimidated. But I said, what do you all want to do? You all want to go to Disney, or you want to go to the health fair? I said, oh, we got to go to the health fair. We got to go to the health fair. And the first thing they said, will we see Robert Scott Bell? Okay. And I said, yeah, he'll be there. Oh, yeah, we got to go to the health fair. We got to go to the health fair. My wife, the first when we got there, Ty, she was hot. She was so mad. I don't even think she spoke to me when we were down there. Didn't speak to me. But you know, as time went on, she kind of, when she met Robert, the kids met Robert, it was an amazing experience. He was teaching, and I just tapped him and said, you know, we're really big fans of yours. My kids love you. He embraced us. You embraced us. And I think that broke the ice. And the energy of what this does is so powerful. When you get around like-minded individuals who all are striving towards the same thing, it's transformational. And it's not even something you can even compare to a Disney. I mean, Disney is transient. You go, you ride, and it's done. But this is a life experience, a life journey. And you know, as we reflect back on going to Chicago for the first time, and we look back and say, look where we started, and look where we are now. Having met you guys, you know, these are now lifelong relationships with a common goal. And it's just, we're going forward from there.
Yeah. Well, that's really impressive, and I'm glad you shared that, because I wanted to show the listeners here, the viewers of this Truth About Cancer series, that you don't have to be a medical doctor. You don't even have to be a full-time researcher to make changes.
That's true.
You know, you are impacting the lives of your children, your family, the children that you teach at the school where you teach at, and you are on a mission to help educate. And that's one of our goals with the Quest for the Cures, is to educate the masses about cancer, about nutrition, about the way that you can take control of your life and to live a healthier life. So we share the same mission, brother.
You're right. And when we were in Asheville, North Carolina, we said we change one mind at a time. When we change one mind, they change a mind, they change a mind. One step at a time.
That's right. Well, Marlon, it's been great. I appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Welcome to Detroit. I hope the rest of the trip is pretty good for you, Ty.
It's going to be good, because we're going to leave from here. We're going to go down to Whole Foods and get some organic food.
Sounds like a plan, buddy.
All right, brother.
All right.
Take care.
Likewise.